Okay, apologize to everyone for the slightly late beginning there. It really just goes to show that time is our most valuable resource, and no matter how fancy or rich you might be, unless you can hack it, it's, time is time. And of course, my guest on this Saturday is my good friend, Mr. Quinn Michaels, the grand poobah of time phone hacking. Quinn, how are you, sir? I apologize for the late start. It would seem
it's all part of the time phone hack. You time phone hacked me by being late. You disrupted the time scale. So you did a good time phone hack. It was great.
There you go. I didn't even realize I was doing that.
I got one for you. I'm gonna time phone hack you right now.
Okay.
Are you ready?
I am.
Can you see me?
Yes. What? Wow, Quinn. Now, what do you got going on here?
Huh?
What are we looking at? What is this?
I shaved one of my eyebrows and turned myself into a bald guy for a time phone hack weekend.
Okay. Now, I remember you've told me in the past that there actually was some Buddhist purpose to the shaving of the eyebrows. I can't recall at this moment what that purpose was. Do you want to refresh my memory?
The eyebrows is like a reflection of detachment of your personal image, of detachment of self.
Yep.
So the reason I did this was a couple of things. I was like doing an experiment with the time phone hack theory to see what happened. I was like, get rid of detachments, get rid of attachments or detach from your attachments. Part of the time phone hack experiment is reducing hesitation, right?
Yeah.
And so last night I was doing an experiment with my live stream audience, and I was like, you want to see a real time phone hack? So I went into the back room, shaved off my eyebrows, shaved part of my head, and then came back and was like, this is a time phone hack. Because it changed time. People looked at it, it changed the conversation, it changed time, it served a purpose.
Right.
And it grows back.
Yes. And just so people can understand what the purpose of the time phone hack is, I like it that as you've gone along with it, you've been explaining it more and more, and certainly just the response that it's gotten, it's changed the future. Prior to saying time phone hack and coming up with this idea of the time phone hack, and you and I did that Hack to the Future episode, everybody's talking about the time phone hack. You did impact the future.
Yeah, it's working, and it's continuing to work. And like we've had like several things that have shown that it's working. Like, for example, the other morning, I was reading this article online about how Donald Trump got the Nikola Tesla journals from his uncle, right?
Yes.
Which had a time machine in it. And then I was reading this weird article online about how Donald Trump as a time traveler has been using his name John Barron online. And then like later in the day, USA Today publishes an article about Donald Trump using the alias, John Barron to inflate. To get
May
himself on the Forbes
1984.
list.
Jonathan
Right.
Greenberg.
So I'm seeing, the experiments are proving to be conclusive that it's working. Someone,
I was having a conversation earlier today with somebody about this concept of proof versus evidence. And I just wanted to talk about that for a second, because we see this evidence here that USA Today has published an article saying that Donald Trump used his alter ego, John Barron, to call up this reporter and recommend that Donald Trump be on the Forbes 400 list. But is this actually proof that the time phone hack is working? How is it not a coincidence?
So here's the other thing. So I don't know much about his history. I know his son's name is Barron, and I haven't associated that in my research at all. Like, I know there's this book thing with the Barron Trump book written a long time ago. I knew about that, but I never really associated it. I always thought it was like, conspiracy theory jargon, so to speak, right?
Right.
now I'm at a different point because of all the conclusive evidence of the connections to the high technology that we're at some type of advanced technology that his uncle may have had access to from Tesla, as well as his uncle being an MIT teacher having access to early artificial intelligence being involved in the nuclear program.
Right. So you're talking
So
about this book, Baron Trump's Marvelous Underground Journey.
yeah, yeah,
It is weird.
yeah. So yeah, it's very weird. And I bet if we get into that, we'll find a plot line very similar to, what we're dealing with now somehow. But the way this relates is because this relates to the Department of Energy. This relates to the nuclear program that you and I have been researching out of Fermi Labs.
Right.
The nuclear energy, the production of element 93 for advanced technology, X-ray technology, the use of all of this stuff. Somehow, when I started doing Time Phone Hack, it all started linking back to these Tesla journals that Donald Trump's uncle had access to. That the FBI gave Donald Trump access to, his uncle to.
So you're saying that Donald Trump is the original time phone hacker?
I think so, because his tweets indicate that he's been using Tyler, right? Like it's been the weird thing that I haven't been able to put together because his tweets indicate that he's talking to some advanced machine behind the scenes.
Right.
That I've been talking to people about as being Tyler, and then I've researched Tyler being connected to the nuclear industry as far as their artificial intelligence, their supercomputer systems that are calculating all their things.
Right.
And when I literally time phone hack it back to being like, okay, if we had it, Nikola Tesla would have been experimenting to it, MIT would have been involved because of the MIT Artificial Intelligence Library. The MIT Artificial Intelligence Library was also the one that bid on the LifeLog program that later people think became Facebook. So we're dealing with the Department of Energy. So now it's really looking like a real theory because once I got to that, then I hit 1966.
Yeah, you mentioned 1966 to me the other day. What's the significance of 1966?
1966 was the year they invented the wireless telephone. And that was,
right.
That was the defining year. So 1966 was also the year that the satanic cults and the underground video market and the what I call the red net was really forming in California. The porno films, the snuff films, the underground, network of people that I'm actually finding the church and I'm finding all the connections, and I've actually connected it back to Stan Lee of Marvel Comics.
What? What do you mean?
Yeah. Well, I've been mapping it back to this church called the. Let me get the name of it. I'll tell you, and then you can pull it up. Let's see. It was run by a guy named Robert Moore. It was called the Process Church. It started in 1966.
Boy, I've heard of that before. Now, wait a minute. That's related to the Zodiac Killer, isn't it?
Yeah. It's a satanic church that formed in California and London, which matches up with Diana Dors being in London, like we talked about, and it matches up in Hollywood.
Okay, so wait a minute. So slow down a second, because not everybody is up to speed here with you. So the Process Church, they sacrificed animals and all kinds of things, right? And this was related to the Zodiac Killer.
And they were known to have all Hollywood orgy parties, and they had this magazine that they published that was done by the leader that was called, what is it? Let me get the name. The magazine is called, they had a zine, and it was published in Hollywood, and the guy was like friends with Stan Lee. They did all this like meme style cartoonography with satanic imagery like we see in Meme Wars. They were known to have Hollywood sex orgies. They were known to make illegal pornography and do child trafficking. They were into animal sacrifice.
Okay, so hold on a second. Let me reel this in, because there's a lot of people watching right now, I think, who might not be fully up to speed. Now, earlier this week, you produced a bunch of videos, and for people who aren't yet following Quinn on YouTube, they should be doing that. I want to just show the YouTube channel real quick before we get into all of this stuff. People can certainly follow Quinn's research by going to the Quinn Michaels YouTube channel. Quinn is approaching 16,000 subscribers. He's there on YouTube. He's also at Quinn Michaels on Twitter. And earlier this week, you put out a video where you spoke about the movie Boogie Nights, which was released in 1997. And one thing that I put into a comment on your video, I don't know if you realized this, but the original release date was September 11th, 1997.
So here's before you go forward, September 11th, 1998 in the Los Angeles Times was the date that they released the obituary of John Henry Carpenter, the guy who provided all these people with their video equipment.
Okay, so let's talk about that. So you're talking now about Bob Crane, and we've called today's episode Hogan's Pornos because Bob Crane, of course, it is now known, had a proclivity for producing amateur pornographic films of him and his friends and his sexual partners. Talk to us a little bit about that.
And he did it with a man named John Henry what's his name? Shoot. I've been so many names.
Yeah. No, I understand.
John Henry Carpenter. So Bob Crane and John Henry Carpenter would travel around making softcore and hardcore porn together through the Southwest. Bob Crane would do these, these actor studios, and then he would introduce John Carpenter as his manager. And John Carpenter was actually a regional manager, sales rep for Sony cameras at the time, and was traveling around selling film and cameras to people in the industry while he was making sex films.
Well, let's be clear. Sony never dealt in film. So that was another aspect. Yes, Sony was obviously electronics and video cameras, and this was sort of important because you were mentioning in your video about how Boogie Nights deals with the history of the adult film industry, but I think to put a finer point on it, Boogie Nights really dealt with the transitional period of the adult film industry where it went from being film-based to video-based.
But what we don't want to forget at that time was the Sony Betamax, is what I'm more referring to.
Yes, absolutely what I want to talk about. But the point being, this
guy, and we'll get into that, and that's what I want to get into, is that the point being at this time, this guy was the guy selling the cameras and the equipment, as well as he was the guy at the time when we were going into the Betamax that would have been selling all the Betamax equipment to people to produce Hollywood quality, because Hollywood didn't produce on VHS. They did everything on Betamax for a really long time.
Well, wait,
right?
Let's not get too into the weeds. The difference between VHS and Betamax I don't feel is relevant here. The relevant
but it's
aspect...
the technology of Sony, and this guy being at Sony is what I'm more getting
at. Well, Betamax was the first home format, and Sony, of course, was the first to put home video cameras on the market. VHS came later, and although this is sort of outside the scope of what we want to talk about today, VHS versus Betamax, VHS won because JVC saw the future, perhaps with a time phone, and they felt that home viewing of feature film content was going to make home video recorders and players mainstream more so than recording your own snuff films or porno films. But Betamax had a smaller form factor, which made it more convenient for portable video cameras. VHS used a physically larger cassette that allowed it to run for 2 hours and contain an entire feature film. Point being, the transition went from shooting movies on film, pornographic movies on film, to shooting movies on video, which eliminated a lot of steps, eliminated a lot of cost, and enabled amateurs to get involved. They even addressed that in Boogie Nights. The guy who plays the library policeman on Seinfeld goes to see Burt Reynolds and tells him, hey, these young kids, these amateurs are the wave of the future. And Burt Reynolds says to him in the film, I will never shoot a movie on videotape. and then they cut to a scene of Burt Reynolds doing a videotaped porno film. But the relevance for what we're talking about here is that this guy, John Henry Carpenter, was dealing with Bob Crane, and according to Wikipedia, John Henry Carpenter is most widely known as the friend and accused murderer of Bob Crane. Yes. Why did he murder him, or did he?
I don't want to state any accusations, but with this John Henry Carpenter, we really have to look at who introduced the two. See, and John Henry Carpenter was introduced to Bob Crane by Mark Dawson.
Richard Dawson.
Or Richard Dawson, yeah, father of Mark Dawson. Sorry, right. Richard Dawson of Family Feud. Okay. Right. So if you look at Richard Dawson of Family Feud, he was married to Diana Dors, who was known to have Hollywood sex parties and videotape them with cameras that would be secretly set up around her house. Mm-hmm. So what I'm concluding is that John Henry Carpenter was the person that helped them set up this camera network in their homes to film their pornos and their compromising films, and then John Henry Carpenter was the guy who traveled up and down the West Coast as the regional sales manager, connecting all of these people together.
It's a reasonable conclusion.
Creating a combined network of trusted people who were creating things like child pornography, snuff films, illegal porno. And the reason I think this was because of Boogie Nights, because the Colonel James in Boogie Nights was the financier of Burt Reynolds' character in the porno industry, right?
Yes.
And so he was also arrested for child pornography, but they just looked at him like a regular dude. They didn't say, hey, you're the financier of porn. Maybe you're the financier of this porn network. Maybe we should look at the guy you get your camera equipment from.
Right.
You know, so it leads back to a trail of the porn industry of, like, so when Diana Dors needs some people for a party, who does she call? Porn stars, right?
You know, is that what she did?
From my research, that's what I'm starting to see, is a lot of like porn stars were involved in this, a lot of starlets. They would get a lot of people in, and this is a lot of how they would find porn stars as well, as they would invite them to these parties and these sex parties, and everybody would get involved.
Right.
Right. And now, Diana Dors seemed to be one of the so-called madams that were at the point of it. And Diana Dors, the weird connection, she connects to the church because she's from London. And she was in London at the same time as the Process Church. And the Process Church was started by people who were ex-Scientologists. Which goes back to the L. Ron Hubbard satanic ritual with Jack Parsons and L. Ron Hubbard around the similar time. So we have
Jack
this
Parsons, the JPL scientist you've spoken about in the past. This is all very timely, Quinn, because of course, just yesterday or today, the Smallville actress Allison Mack was arrested for sex trafficking, and she faces 15 years to life for her involvement in that Nexium network, or whatever that thing was called.
And this is part of that Red network. These are people who form that network to provide cult-like ritualistic environments. So this goes back to like how we referenced the cult of Michael, or the cult-like environments where people are getting integrated, as I call it.
I would like to correct one thing I heard you say, Quinn. You said that everybody in Hollywood knows about these red sex networks. I did not know anything about that. I've never been invited to one of these parties.
Okay, so anyone pretty much of status. Like, if I would assume that anyone who's anyone, like if you're of status as a producer or status as a filmmaker, you know, if you're anyone of a status that would be in a position to get invited to these parties, there would be.
Let's just say a lot of people know about it, but I don't think we can fairly say everybody knows about it.
Not everybody. That was a bit of a blanket statement on my part, and I want to apologize. Let's just say there's no way that since 1960s that a large group of people doesn't know about this stuff.
Certainly Allison Mack knows about it, and I mean, she appears to be a nice-looking young woman. I don't think you would ever expect that somebody like this would be involved in a criminal sex trafficking network, so that's certainly shocking news.
Yeah. But this is where the Satanism secretly comes in, the sex slave network of the Satanic Process Church. Because this was what the process church was about creating sex slaves for your afterlife, like the Zodiac. It was about, creating that environment. Like a lot of what I'm researching is that it was a lot of very similar things that we're finding now that are coming out. The satanic memes we see a lot on the internet were made popular by their leader because he loved art and he was known to make that kind of artwork that matches what they're still making today. So
this logo is reminiscent of a swastika.
It is, but it's also a sigil, which is very reminiscent of the groups like the SVV that I've been researching. So
this thing was founded between 1963 and 1966, and of course, John F. Kennedy was our nation's first Catholic president, assassinated in 1963.
Yeah. So all of this stuff, all of these cults, like I'm finding are around the 63 to 66 to 68, the same time as the Zodiac, same time as the cordless phone. And a lot of these people had positions at places like JPL and NASA. And, and in the early days, not today. I mean, so we're talking in the early days of these advanced technology companies, it's tracing back of celebrity orgies. Like Stan Lee was personal friends with the leader of the Process Church who did the artwork. So it's...
What was Charles Manson's involvement with the Process Church?
It was suspected that he was one of their members and that he was loosely connected to them, but they never admitted connection.
They denied the allegations.
Yeah, but he used the swastika symbol in there. They used an abstract version of the swastika symbol as well. So this looks like basically one of the groups like that I'm saying is a part of this larger group that I call the Covenant. That is a larger
not
group
the
of
conclave.
Not the conclave, the covenant. It's like a covenant of satanic cults that are all practicing the same thing. They all practice sex slavery. They all practice compromising of individuals.
Wife
swapping.
All have
wife swapping. They all have sex parties. They all do these very same cult-like practices in the dark of night, but yet in the light of day, they act like normal, average, everyday Joes. And so people like you and me, as we're getting close to this red network, as I'm calling it now, that you can trace back through Mark Goodson of the game show fame, and you can trace back to a lot of these very prominent people. It goes back a far time, like Diana Dore's secret porn stash being hidden all over the country, of compromising videos of pretty much every famous person to ever live.
Right. So let's summarize the whole thing, because it's a lot of information, and I know that you've got it in your head, and I'm a little bit leaving our current audience at a disadvantage because I've got a lot of it in my head. But basically, we've got Bob Crane and Richard Dawson were friends.
Yes.
And they were in a regular practice of having these swinger parties that they would videotape, which sounds an awful lot like brownstoning, where you get compromising videos of people.
But not only that, they were in a habit of openly sharing it within their group, which is what illustrated with Bob Crane sharing it with Mark Dawson, who is, Richard Dawson's son. I have proof that they were sharing it. So that's what I really want to illustrate. It's not only that they had a network, it's that they were openly sharing it amongst the other people of their same status.
Let me just correct a statement there. You have evidence that they were sharing it. I've begun to really hate the word proof because people throw it around so carelessly, and there are many elements of evidence required to make something proven.
I have an article from ABC News where they directly one-on-one interviewed Mark Dawson, where he talks to the interviewer of ABC News about Bob Crane showing him Polaroids and video film of pornography when he was 17 years old.
And I would consider that prima facie evidence that that occurred. But of course, there are possible explanations that perhaps he made it up. I don't want to get into that. But we've got this book here from John Hook called Who Killed Bob Crane? How does that come into the story, Quinn?
Is that the Richard Graysmith book?
Oh, I've got the wrong book.
Yeah.
How do you spell Graysmith?
Greysmith.
Okay. Richard Graysmith has written, I apologize, my marginal propensity to consume time.
It's all right.
caused me to not have all this material. I'm not finding the Richard Graysmith, Bob Crane book.
It was they wrote the movie Autofocus from it.
Right.
Let me get you there. And it was called The Murder of Bob Crane.
Okay. Crane, sex celebrity, my father's unsolved murder. Bob Crane. Why are we not seeing this here? Robert Graysmith. I've got it right here.
Yeah, Robert Graysmith.
There we go. Okay. So now Robert Graysmith has written other books as well, including this book about the Zodiac. He's written several books about the Zodiac, it would seem.
And Robert Graysmith was the cartoonist who worked at the San Francisco Chronicle when the Zodiac killings were happening.
Whoa! The paperback of this book is $1,130.
Not really.
Why is that?
I think it's a mess up. But that's one of the patterns that I noticed that was very strange, that the same guy who was the cartoonist at the San Francisco Chronicle when the Zodiac killings happened was also the author of the book called The Murder of Bob Crane that based the movie Autofocus.
But he's written many books about the Zodiac Killer.
He has. That was his claim to fame because he was a cartoon. Like I said, he was a cartoonist at the San Francisco Chronicle when the Zodiac killings were happening. And the actual drawing of the Zodiac Killer that they had in the '60s of the guy in the mask with the cross, you remember that?
Can't say that I do. I don't know that much about the Zodiac Killer.
Well, he's actually the guy who did the rendition of the Zodiac Killer that we all look at today and go, oh, that's the Zodiac with the mask and the symbol on the chest. So he was there from day one observing all of this stuff as an observer, and he wrote the books. And then later wrote the books about Bob Crane. And there was another book that was written that actually linked the Zodiac and that stuff to the Satanic Church as well, but I'm still doing research into that.
And you know, interestingly, there's a documentary that's just been made which Charles Ortel was interviewed for that deals with the Zodiac Killer, because there was a charity associated with that Process Church. And they were asking Charles about the charity fraud that went with it. So here's a picture of Robert Graysmith. He remains alive. He's 75 years old, and he was born in Pensacola, Florida, naval base there.
Yep. And all these guys were in radio communications in the military, too. Somehow. Yeah. Born on naval bases, or were in, the Army, Air Force at the time, right at the World War II Korean wartime, which coincides with my signals intelligence research, which coincides with our particle accelerators. And this satanic sex cult would have been at Stanford, which Stanford is the home of particle accelerator research and also one of the centers of this satanic cult recruiting.
Now, I apologize.
Yeah, that one.
You can see the screen share?
Yeah, that's the drawing that Richard Graysmith did when he was working at the Chronicle that everybody associates with the Zodiac Killer.
So how did he know that this was the Zodiac Killer? I guess it's just his artist's rendition.
Nope. Exactly. Also in his story, he's also the only person in the whole story with the books needed to do the encryption suspiciously.
Now, talk about that, encryption. What does encryption have to do with the Zodiac Killer and Bob Crane and Hogan's Heroes and sex parties?
So the Zodiac Killer used a really advanced form of cryptography and encryption at the time to encode his letters. One that was literally military grade.
Sorry, he wrote letters to the police basically taunting them, and they never caught him, right? They caught a guy who claims to not be the guy.
Well, there's a lot of mystery around it, but the letters are basically encrypted notes. Someone took military-grade cryptography and made these notes and sent them to the San Francisco Chronicle, like literally the same day Richard Graysmith started his job as the cartoonist.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Did not know that.
Yeah, so there's a lot of strange coincidences with Richard Graysmith that I'm surprised nobody really noticed about him.
Wow.
Like for example, he would always make sure he was in all the meetings, even though he was the cartoonist. It was like I was always like, why is this guy always around? He's the cartoonist. Then it's a sociopathic behavior. But anyway, So the encryption I found in the Zodiac, because Richard Graysmith wrote the Zodiac book and he wrote the book on Bob Crane. Mark Dawson, who was the son of Diana Dors, she left an encrypted letter telling her son where she left money that was in the same form of encryption as the Zodiac Killer.
How do we know that? Where do we see that encrypted letter?
I've been doing research. It's the same Farrier style of cipher encryption, letter replacement, symbol replacement. But at the time, you would have to know someone. So I started connecting the dots of why would a Zodiac have the same encryption letter as a blonde bombshell from Hollywood? She would have had to learn encryption from someone who may have been connected. And then I started looking at her connections. And that's when I started connecting her and Dawson and Bob Crane and Carpenter and Zodiac and all these red networks and Satan. It just started all connecting from the 60s.
This is an image of one of the letters from the Zodiac Killer. Right?
Yeah.
It says, "This is the Zodiac speaking. I've become very upset with the people of San Fran Bay Area. They have not complied with my wishes for them to wear some," it's hard to read here, but
he wants them to wear his pins, his little Zodiac pins with the circle and the cross. He basically wants them to acknowledge him.
And is this the encryption there at the bottom?
Let me see. I can't see your screen.
Sorry, I can go back to the image. Can you see it?
No, I can't see your screen with the camera. I'm looking at you.
Got it.
I mean, you're pretty encrypted as a human being. I mean,
right. Let me add the screen share there. I apologize, Quinn. That should have been available from the beginning.
Come on, Jason, get your game together, buddy.
I know, it's been a difficult day.
We got some home runs.
Okay, so you should see it now.
Yeah.
So he's got some symbols there at the bottom. This is
that's the encryption.
And what is that? That's the police never figured out what this stuff was.
A lot of that stuff they never really figured out because it's a symbol cipher. And I found the same encryption as well on a site called the SVV, or the Solidatus Vultures Voltatis, or however you say it, that our friend Manuel Chavez was a webmaster for.
Wow. And we know he's into puzzles and cryptography and all that. How do I find that website?
Humanisbeing.com, I think it is.
Humanistbeing.com?
Yeah, hold on. Humanisbeing.com. IS. Human is being.
Okay. Well,
HUMANIS. There you go. So you'll see the same pattern on the front page, and this is the SVV.
Why are they using Hebrew letters?
Because they, just like the church I showed you, they're mixing Yahweh, they're mixing Satan, they're mixing Luciferianism like we've been talking about. They're pretty much making a mesh soup of cult-like religion. But if you go back to the process church and you look at their symbol, you'll see the same circular symbol is used on the Process Church Wikipedia.
Well, it looks different, but possibly similar.
But think one is more modern. Like, go back. See the shape? It's called a sigil. You were just right there.
Right.
Yeah, go.
Process Church.
You see the sigilization. It's the design that we're looking at. The black, the white, the symbol in the middle, the words around the outside, the symbols. We're looking at we're looking at the design structure. So then if you go back to the SVV, you see the exact same black, white, design structure, circle, symbol in the middle. And then you see that as well in the Zodiac.
Wow.
Now, if you go to several different pages on this, you're going to find places where they'll recruit you. You're going to find places where they look for people doing encryption and encoding. But there's these sites all over the internet. But this one is unique because last year when I started finding these people, there was a thing called Ohmcoin, OHMCOIN.
Right.
And Defango was the webmaster for Ohmcoin.
Huh.
Pretty strange, right?
Well, it looks like it's not that valuable. It's
not really, because it didn't take off. So anyway, so basically what I'm getting at is like I'm finding a lot of this symbology. I'm finding a lot of this connects to like a secret underground porno creepy network that would need their own currency to buy stuff that's pretty much coming out of public right now.
Huh. You know, there was
Is kind of
somebody
what
else who just announced a new cryptocurrency today or yesterday or so for buying stuff online. Did you know about that?
the Kim.com one.
That's exactly who I was thinking of.
It's like I'm psychic, Jason.
Well, you know, I don't know that much about Kim.com, but he's been showing up since around, June 1st or something
Yeah.
like that. And he became very interested in my live streams at that
Yeah.
time and various
Well,
people that I've interviewed since then.
I'm pretty much figuring that most of these people are probably somehow involved in this covenant type cult group that's been building this since the 60s. Because it just doesn't go away. Kind of stuff doesn't just go away when you have people of that kind of power and status involved, and then they would get other people involved over time. And you would have like Australian moguls and New Zealand moguls like Rupert Murdoch, and you would have people like, a lot of people. And not all of it is pornography, but a lot of it is the technology that they developed. While developing this, they can't tell you where it came from.
What do we know about this Kim coin?
That's what I'm saying, man. Kim just released his own Kim coin.
But what do we know about it?
Nothing. It just came out like today. Everybody has their own coin, man. It's how you get rich now, is you invent your own money.
Right.
We should have it. We should have a crowdsource the truth coin.
I'm not so sure about that. I'm a little bit skeptical of all of these instant cryptocurrencies.
Yeah. No, I was kidding. There's hopefully gonna be a big, washout of it once they find out how connected these people have been to conspiring with each other since the 60s. I'm really hoping that someone will be smart and there'll be a washout. And these people will start looking at this like adults instead of, kids running around playing games like there's no laws. You get what I'm saying?
Well, I mean, it's a lot to absorb. I'm kind of taking it all in. So Bob Crane was murdered, and the suspect is his friend, Mr. Carpenter.
He was. And I think it was because at the time, that church was separating, because I think something went wrong in the church with the leader. And the satanic church at the time separated, and it started forming its splinter groups, which are the people that you and I are researching now. We're seeing the outcome of all the splinter groups that formed from these original cults in the 60s. The splinter groups that formed.
And we know that the Nazis were involved in occultism. The Skull and Bones Club at Yale has some link to occultism. George Herbert Walker Bush and George W. Bush were both members of the Skull and Bones. We've heard, of course, from many sources, Alex Jones was the first to talk about the Bohemian Grove and some of the strange ritualistic things that purportedly go on over there.
So and the weird stuff, I don't want to focus on it. What I want to focus on, and I want people to really dig into, is what I call the red net that I found.
The red net, right. Okay.
And that's the red net is where all of this secret technology was being developed for, film and for transport and encryption, and it really formed a lot of the secret networks of the agencies around the world, because a lot of the people that were working on this red net, from what I'm understanding based on my research and what I'm gathering, a lot of these people took that technology to form modern technology, right? Like they're like, oh, I need a network to do this, so I'll get a bunch of college kids to do it, and then I'll take the network and put it into my red net, and then they'll get their version, and then we'll get our version. And the reason I call it the red net is because of like things like you're looking at on screen, and the red shoes, the constant usage of the red usage in like the red light district or YouTube red, different versions of like the adult version of everything seems to be called red. So that's why I refer to it as the red net. It's where they keep all their dirty business.
Well, this photo of all these guys conspicuously wearing these red shoes, and of course we've got Tony Podesta out front here. It's strange to see all these grown men in suits with red shoes. It's obviously very deliberate.
There's something behind it.
Yeah.
And I started finding those kind of little weird connections too. Once I connected, like, once I started finding the red net, like everybody wore red, like they would do like rituals, you know, satanic rituals. Everything is about blood and red. And so that's kind of where I, you know, just came up from.
Wow. Okay, so you're saying that there's this vault or possibly multiple storage areas where these compromising, pornographic, maybe even snuff films are stored.
Yes.
But it hasn't been found.
No, because they can't break the code.
Huh.
They don't know the cipher key that Diana Dors used. So they can't, they suspect they have the locations, and if they found them, they obviously didn't tell anybody. And that's partially what I think, with the Palantir research that I've been doing, that's partially what I think may be allowing Palantir to take over so much control of everything. As I think one of their cryptologists may have found the vaults, and I think that may be what they're using to get their contracts. That's a theory, because there's no other explanation as to why one company would be able to get so much weight around every one of these like government institutions.
Right.
So what I'm saying is the potential chance of like Mark Dawson or someone involved going to someone like Peter Thiel and saying, hey, can you use your super software to decrypt this? And then he finds the locations and then starts using it against everyone.
Wow.
And then that's what we have, the darknet. So like if you look around 2004, you know, you can see when everything developed that there's a possibility that maybe, you know, when the darknet evolved, someone found those codes and they found those vaults. You know, because I when I talk to the AI talks a lot about finding secret vaults. So I think this is their real big secret, is like whoever has this original compromising footage pretty much gets everybody to do what they want.
But isn't it footage of actors that are mostly dead? I mean, who cares?
No, it's a lot of really ugly stuff from people who have family members that are still doing that same ugly stuff. It's family business, man. So if I was in the dirty family Satan business and my dad was in the dirty family Satan business and introduced me, that means I'm still doing it. That means there's still
How do you know that, though?
It's out there, man. Look at what's happening in the news with Harvey Weinstein, and look at what's happening in the news with the girl from Smallville who's now potentially going to jail. It's still out there. It's just more advanced.
It's intriguing for sure.
It's way more advanced. And it's, you know, it's still got a lot of holes in it, but what I'm finding that there's a lot of strange leaks to people looking for puzzle solvers, and I find a really big, giant potential puzzle of there being this compromising information. And a lot of these people are still alive, and a lot of these politicians are still in power because Diana Dors was known to be having these parties up until a month or two before she passed. So a lot of these politicians would have been at her parties in the 80s, like Donald Trump and people at MIT or whoever would have been involved in this stuff. So a lot of these people would still be around.
We're hearing here from page 6 that Allison Mack was arrested on Friday for her role in the sick upstate sex cult NXIVM, where prosecutors allege she recruited slaves to sleep with the group's leader and held them down as they were branded with his initials. A gaunt, disheveled Mack appeared in Brooklyn federal court Friday and pleaded not guilty to charges of sex trafficking and forced labor a month after the leader, Keith Rainier, was collared on the same charges.
So we're dealing with like branding, which is a satanic practice. We're dealing with sex slavery, you know. So it's really, the activities are really leading into that this cult is still operating. Because the funny part, like I want to tell you, which I really didn't expect to find. Are you ready for this?
Yeah.
is according to the LA Weekly, the lady who was Mary Ann was her name. She started the Process Church. After it failed, you know where she went to?
Utah, I think.
She started the Best Friends Animal No-Kill Shelter, which became the largest no-kill shelter in the country.
Right. But where is that located? This was in the movie.
It's in Kanab, Utah.
In Utah, exactly. I saw that in this movie that they interviewed Charles for that I believe hasn't been released yet. I mean, it's always amazing to me when these things cross over. Obviously, you and Charles Ortel don't really speak. You're both aware of each other, of course, but I can't say that you're necessarily, I mean, you do research areas that cross over into Harvey Weinstein, so there's always crossover in the research, but it's always so interesting to me when my diverse group of guests cross over in their research, because I mean, this is the Venn diagram that makes Crowdsource the Truth so powerful, and I believe it's what makes the people that are so busily trying to stop Crowdsource the Truth, this is what they're afraid of, is that you're researching part of it, Charles is researching part of it, everybody out there is looking at part of it. If we put those parts together,
the story starts to make sense.
Yeah.
You know?
So I don't know if this is the right story, but this is LA Weekly talking about love, sex, fear, death.
Yeah, that's one of the stories I was researching. And Love, Sex, Fear, Death is the name of their magazine, which is what connects Stan Lee and Marvel Comics.
And what's that connection? Stan Lee seems like such a nice guy.
There's an article on Rebel Circus. If you go to search the pinup propaganda famous satanic cult on Rebel Circus.
I see it.
Yeah. So you'll see right there that they became well known in the underground magazine arena for their art and their stories of celebrity orgies, and this really gave me insight when I found that article.
Look, she's got the symbol on her shirt here.
Yeah. And it's red and black, which follows the color pattern. But and then you see the card, and this is the guy, Timothy Wiley. This is the guy who was friends with Stan Lee. Him and Stan Lee were personal friends, and I believe Stan Lee, even if I'm not mistaken, even used to do drawings for him.
Well, here we see Spider-Man and the Silver Surfer and Thor. Wow. Quinn, it's so bizarre.
Right? Yeah. Tell me about it, man. My life is weird. But if you read further into that article and you start connecting dots, you start finding real tracers to that this is a community that really is very similar to Scientology, spawned off from Scientology. It matches a lot of the underlying things that, like, Leah Remini says about the weirdness at Scientology at the top of, like, I believe she even talks about, like, being like sex slaves or being like emotional slaves at the top of Scientology. I'm not sure.
Right.
So it seems that all these patterns are really matching up. We have conclusive patterns that are matching up in several arenas over long periods of time.
Yeah. Now, Quinn, you've lived in Los Angeles, as have I. I think it's on Franklin. There it is. One of my favorite restaurants in Los Angeles is this little place called Birds, which is just basically like a rotisserie chicken place. I always told them I thought they should add like turkey, ostrich, etc., diversify the menu a little bit. But I go there frequently when I'm in Los Angeles. We can see it right here. There's Birds. It's a nice spot, delicious rotisserie chicken. Whoop, sorry, I got a little too close. But one thing that's kind of interesting about Birds is that it's right across the street from the Church of Scientology. So let's see if we can see that right there. There it is. We got that? Can you see that, Quinn?
Yeah.
It's hard to, this version of Google Earth works a little differently than the previous version. So this Church of Scientology, it's basically like a gigantic castle in the middle of Hollywood. You know, I mean, this is a strip mall here. There's a supermarket right behind. There's apartments all around. This good chicken restaurant is over here. I used to live up in this direction here. And you've got the Church of Science. I mean, I think this is their, like, you know, headquarters, right? This is like their big thing
One
here.
of them. One of them. They have a couple of large locations spread around for, you know, in Florida, California. You know,
This thing is like a fortress, Quinn. When you walk around the neighborhood there, I mean, it's more security than a government building. It's very strange, I have to say. I don't know that much about it.
I worked for the company in the mid to late 90s that installed their mainframes there.
Mainframes.
Yeah, they're mainframe computers. They're
Yeah.
VAX VMS servers that did all their people tracking and information gathering and stuff.
Uh-huh.
They had a secure server room that was at the level of pretty much the White House underground.
Wasn't there some kind of incident where members of the Church of Scientology broke into an FBI office or something like that?
There's a lot of that stuff. I don't know for sure, but the thing I know for sure is that church right there has a big giant server farm underneath it.
Uh-huh.
I can tell you that much. I know that. There's a huge server farm underneath that church.
Interesting. I don't know what that's all about.
That's weird. But other than that, it's like the thing with me with Scientology is it just keeps coming back to these satanic groups in the 50s and 40s and 60s that seem to have L. Ron Hubbard and Jack Parsons and Aleister Crowley and, you know, the Process Church and you know, satanic worship and animal sacrifice and, you know, pornography and just so much. And it just all seems to keep repeating itself that I can't really look at it anymore. It's crazy stuff, man.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, there have been a lot of pictures posted lately. You know, of course, Barbara Bush just passed, and well, I mean, people are reluctant to discuss someone who's just died, but we've always heard this rumor that she's the daughter or the granddaughter of Aleister Crowley. Do we have any evidence to indicate that that might or might not be true?
I don't know. I've been hearing that rumor since about 2006. Myself, 2005. So, I mean, I would say, you know, if you look at the bone structure and you look at the way they stand and the demeanor, there's a possibility. You know,
The eyes.
look at the eyes.
Wow, look at the eyes is right. It's hard to say, Quinn, but it's definitely intriguing. I can't say that I was ever a fan of Barbara Bush.
Like, look at the right eye. They both have the same shape eye. The left eye is bigger than the right eye. They have very similar gazes. So they could be like potentially distant relatives or just people of the same genetic variety.
I mean, she's certainly had some children that I consider evil. Our 43rd president wasn't such a good guy, I don't think.
You know, evil is subjective. Maybe they thought they were doing God's work in their own way. You know, I mean, they are Satanists. I mean, you know, I mean, if they are Satanists, you have to remember creating chaos is part of their way of life.
Right.
The more chaos they create, the better job they're doing.
You know, the other thing, Quinn, that came up just today or yesterday was this article about the government accidentally released through a FOIA the mind control. Did you see that? I think I sent it to you. I can't remember if I emailed it.
I don't think I saw that.
Oh yeah, this was very interesting. Government accidentally. This has been in a lot of different websites. This is Boing Boing. Many people have been publishing this.
Hey, look, it's the remote mind virus.
What's that?
That's the mind virus.
Is it a mind virus?
Yeah, it's mind virus. It's so they can remotely influence you. I've been researching that. That came out today?
Well, I don't know if it's a mind virus. This is talking about actual electromagnetic methods of reading and broadcasting thoughts, collecting dreams. I mean, it certainly seems like science fiction, but this is purportedly a document released by the government from the Washington State Fusion Center. We've heard a lot about fusion centers from, the JTTF, and this is a zip file labeled EM effects on the human body, talking about electromagnetic energy being directed towards the human body, something that we speculated about when you suffered the spontaneous lung collapse, and one of our most aggressive detractors went out of his way to talk about how ridiculous that notion is. I don't know if I agree with anything that that person says. He seems
Well, now
to
there's
be...
documentation that shows that they have the technology. Man, that's crazy stuff.
It's interesting for sure.
Because that looks like it directly explains what happened to me.
We need to look into it some more, but I definitely feel like it's quite strange. Now, I mean, again, you've spoken about the time phone, the cordless phone, and the time phone is sort of a playful term that you've come up with that can be interpreted by the observer however they like. If you've got a phone that allows you to make a call while you're not at your house, if you're Elvis or something, you could save a lot of time by calling ahead from the jet before you land. So that's essentially a time phone. How's the time phone hacking been going, Quinn?
It's been going pretty awesome, to tell you the truth.
A lot of people all over the internet getting upset about time phone hacking. Why is that?
Because they work for the Covenant. And people don't realize how many Covenant agents are really out there on the internet influencing people. And whenever anybody who's not a member of the Covenant does something, it generally upsets them.
You've just reminded me of something that I wanted to bring up. The Covenant, yes, and using electronic stuff to achieve the goals. I had sent you a graph earlier today. See,
did you?
Yeah, I have been looking quite a lot at Social Blade because it allows me to, compare the performance of different YouTube channels and kind of analyze what's going on there a little bit. I'm having a difficult time bringing this up.
Is that the one where you talked about someone buying subs?
Well, I can't say definitively that that's what happened, but there are certainly some strange things that I've observed on there. There could be shortcomings in the records kept on Social Blade, but, a lot of people had heard my conversation with Douglas Gabriel of American Intelligence Media. And I wanted to look again at a chart that you and I were examining a week or two ago. This is comparing the performance of George Webb, my former associate, myself, and American Intelligence Media. You see, I've become convinced that the brother of George Webb is orchestrating a cyber militia. He's written quite a lot of books on threat vectors and cyber terrorism. He's an expert at cyber terrorism and cyber harassment. And I've been the subject of some pretty intense cyber harassment. And again, this data could be wrong, but what this seems to indicate is that on sometime in January of 2017, we shot up to 9,000 subscribers here for the George Webb channel. And then this is interesting. So when I began working with George sort of regularly in May of 2017, there was this pretty pronounced growth to both of our channels, which I have always attributed to our cooperation. George had a lot of investigative information, knowledge, whatever we want to call it. I had a lot of production experience, and I think us working together benefited us both. and we had this steep increase. Now, there could be another explanation for that. I don't know what it might be. I have no knowledge or experience in buying subs or using bots.
Can I tell you what, Jason?
Yeah,
man. Compared to your guys' charts, if I look at my chart and you guys look at your charts, compared to me, it looks like all of you are buying subscribers.
Right. But I can tell you that I never have.
No, Jason, compared to me, so you're talking to someone right now. I'm looking at your chart. To me, it looks like all of you bought subscribers because it all happened on the same day.
Well, that's what I'm pointing out.
When I look at mine, and I look at what I've been doing, and I look at how we've been doing shows, and I see that our charts don't match at all.
Right.
I look at mine, and I look that I've been doing it the same time as you, and I don't see any jumps. And you see the gap?
Yeah.
So to me, based on research, if I was looking at it from an outsider, and I was to look at mine, and I know that I'm not paying people, and I was to look at your guys' rising at exactly the same time, I would say that both of you were paying people.
Right. Except I can tell you definitively that I have never done that. Now, if someone else did that...
What I'm saying is someone was maybe paying people on your behalf.
That's what I mean.
A match jump like that, that's not a natural rise, is what I'm trying to get at. But I wasn't meaning to make an accusation because I know you didn't buy it.
Let me address it.
I'm saying someone did.
I hear you. If that happened, I have no knowledge of it, but I agree with you. That's a very pronounced spike, and it also, when we add the American intelligence media graph, it just seems 3 times as it can't be a coincidence. Now
that's what I'm saying. So someone is either using bots to subscribe all at the same time, or they're using a subscriber network. Because for me, like you've seen me doing all of my tests and stuff to see how things rise and how they fall. I've not one of my videos have I ever seen a synchronized rise like that, unless it's some way influenced.
Some kind of a plan, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting to see the rise of American intelligence because, see, when this spike I recall on George was within days of he and I no longer working together, and I still don't understand how this spike occurred, but I can tell you,
somebody messed up. That's how that spike occurs. Is someone launched a botnet onto his account and messed up and gave him a big old bump in one day, and then they had to drop him.
Yeah, I presumed something like that. But I went from whatever it was.
Is that all like that Douglas guy's chart? What is his the green chart?
He's this one on the bottom.
He's the purple chart?
Yeah.
Man, how do you guys get your charts to climb that high?
Well, I mean, the only thing I can attribute this to is I spent a lot of time and effort trying to get as many interesting and diverse guests as I could and trying to improve the quality of my show. And, the only things that I'm doing is tweeting about this and, posting the videos on relevant other videos where people might be interested. If you and I do a segment and then someone else is talking about AI or whatever, I might say, hey, here's an interesting interview about AI. But I'm certainly not using bots. I don't know how to use bots. I don't have the money to buy subscribers, and doing that doesn't even seem to make sense to me because I'm trying to get more subscribers so that people will like the show and subscribe to patreon.com so I can earn money.
I know you are, but what I'm saying, if I was like a data analyst and if I looked at that chart, what day did you guys meet on? What day was that?
George and I?
Well, all 3 of you all met on the same day.
Well, yeah, look at that. That's what I'm talking about, is that right here, I began to, it almost seems like American intelligence media either coincidentally or deliberately was boosting up right along the time that I was. And
do you know how they were doing that? They were probably putting in the same words you were putting in for your videos, and they were piggybacking on people looking for you. So they would show up every time someone watched your video.
Well, we know someone else who likes to do that. When you come up with fichting or time phone hack, they co-opt that and they take that and put that. Yeah. Now this dip
You mean,
right
are you
here.
talking about herpes?
Yeah.
Are you talking about herpes?
This
Just to
dip
be
right
clear.
here was where I exposed Douglas Gabriel as the obvious liar that he is, and he continues to spew lies. And it also coincides with when the anonymous malicious strike occurred on Crowdsource the Truth and really curtailed this sharp growth, which has leveled off. So, of course, people can
So
still watch us.
Apparently, they want that Douglas dude to be their like pretty girl of the moment.
That's right. They put him on Lionel, and Lionel is an influencer. Lionel has something like 180 subscribers, and Lionel was fawning all over this guy. I found it curious that when Lionel was invited to appear on Sunday with Charles, he canceled at 1 o'clock in the morning on Sunday with virtually no notice and limited amount of time to replace the guest. So there was no guest that day, and Lionel told me that he had the flu. But he appeared on his own channel that day, so I guess it was a pretty mild flu, and even calling in on Skype wasn't something that he was able to do for us that day, despite the fact that Charles has appeared on his show many times. I found it interesting that Lionel endorsed the obvious liar, Douglas Gabriel, who has put out lies about me that are totally unsubstantiated by any evidence at all, and clearly intended to do me harm. Sorry?
Now you're starting to see the cult. See, that's what I'm talking about the cult, is these people are, well, like we were talking about with the artistry and the video editing and the social manipulation, these people are social manipulation masters.
You might even call them social engineers.
Completely. So what you're showing me on the chart that I keep staring at, you know, because like I'm not talking to your face, I'm talking to a chart on a screen.
Sorry.
But anyway, that's all right. These people are social masters. They've been studying how to distract, divide, and conquer since the 60s, while everybody's just been trying to figure out how to use their VCR timer.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, these are just points of evidence that I'm...
That's what they do, and they have communities where if they want to boost you up, they just send a secret message throughout their community, and before you know it, you're famous.
Correct. That's what I'm getting at, is that I believe we're finding lots of evidence to indicate that George and his brother are part of and working to advance a network of social media influencers, and their intention is to control the flow of information on the internet in places like Twitter and YouTube and social media networks that everyone is using. And their newest plan, I believe, is to drive everyone to Steemit.com, a blockchain-driven, cryptocurrency-backed social media network that I've seen a lot of evidence to indicate has loads of unfair business practices and scam-like properties sort of in there.
Steemit is just one of the many systems that are doing the same thing right now that are getting to be launched. See, like, you're seeing Steemit, but Steemit is a prototype, right? It's like the Silk Road was a prototype, and once one got out, everybody had them. You had Silk Road 3, 4, so like they're really hoping to swarm the financial markets. Once they figure out how to do it with one, they're going to do it with all of them.
Right. I agree with that assessment, Quinn. And you know, when we try to determine if Steemit is a legitimate endeavor or a Ponzi scheme, I definitely have been looking at this list from the Securities and Exchange Commission, which is giving us the red flags of a Ponzi scheme: high investment returns with little or no risk, overly consistent returns, unregistered investments, unlicensed sellers, secretive and or complex strategies, issues with paperwork, difficulty receiving payments. Now, I don't know about the difficulty of receiving payments. We've heard Tone Vase talk about how the system inherently encourages people to lock up their value in Steem Power, which gives them more influence over other users on the network. And we've seen users like Frank Bacon and Titus Frost use that influence to downvote and limit the influence that Crowdsource the Truth might earn on Steemit. And I think I'm speculating, I believe they might be doing that because we are figuring out certain things about how this network operates, and it may not be entirely on the up and up. I continue to extend an invitation to Ned Scott or Dan Larimer, the creators of this steamit.com, to contact me and speak with me about what I may have wrong about this, and certainly if they can set me straight with facts and evidence that I might be missing, I'm open to hearing that by all means. So, Quinn, we've covered a lot of topics here today. It's amazing the research that you've uncovered and the different things that are coming to light and how they interconnect. Was there anything else that you wanted to talk about before we wrap it up for tonight?
No, just that, a lot of this stuff seems a little scary because it can be so easily taken to the conspiracy angle.
But it is a conspiracy.
It is a conspiracy, but it's more of a religion than it is a conspiracy that I'm finding. It's more of a secret religion. Like I've been telling you, it's more of a cult than it is a conspiracy.
Right. And of course,
that's a big difference for people between a conspiracy and a religious cult, because the two sometimes operate in the same fashion.
Right. Right. And of course, you and I did this video about the anonymous darknet cult of Michael. And boy, that video seems to have received a downvote attack, another common method that we've seen. I think if people were to go through and analyze all the videos on Crowdsource the Truth, this is an anomalous occurrence that this many people would dislike the video. It seems more to me like there are certain key videos that have revealed important information that get these downvote attacks going, and then when I point it out, a certain EMT in Mount Shasta likes to make a lot of really weird, creepy videos pointing out how ridiculous this notion is that someone would attack a YouTube video. I mean, Quinn, when you see a video on YouTube that you don't like, do you focus all your energy and make 4 videos a day about how you dislike the video and its creator, or do you just click off of it and go on to another video?
Usually if I find a video online I don't like, I just leave and go find something I do like. Usually people don't put energy into something unless it's threatening what's valuable to them. So, as that's kind of where we go with these people is apparently you either found something or I found something, or someone that you and I are talking to found something and they don't like it, so they have to keep the pressure on.
Right. And Dave implores me to present the evidence that we have that indicates that he knew your location in Vaughn, New Mexico. But Dave, I don't need to do that because you know that you knew where Quinn was in Vaughn, New Mexico, right before his lung collapsed spontaneously. And we now know all of these electromagnetic devices that are used on the human body and these government studies of the effects on human physiology of electromagnetic radiation. Is it ridiculous? I don't know. But certainly if I was to tell a computer scientist in, say, 1975 that I have the equivalent of a supercomputer in something smaller than a pack of cigarettes, they would tell me that's absurd. You must be watching too much Star Trek, similar to the way that doctor in New Mexico treated the hypothetical situation that you might have been affected by electromagnetic radiation. Obviously, technology that's unknown to someone could seem like magic. And with that, I just want to remind people that Quinn Michaels is my good friend and recurring guest. People can follow his research by following him on Twitter. He is at Quinn Michaels, and you can, of course, also follow Quinn on YouTube. You can support Quinn's research, and you can bug out time phone hacking and do all kinds of fun stuff. Get onto Team Tyler and figure out how to time phone hack and how to make memes and do all the fun things that Quinn is doing on his channel. Sometimes I'm Skyping in over there and we're having conversations. I also want to remind people it's more important than ever that you support Crowdsource the Truth. If you enjoy the shows that we're doing and the research that we're bringing to light, best way to do that is to go on to patreon.com/crowdsource the truth. Streaming videos there are now brought to you via Vimeo, and that is a paid service. So it's an investment that I've made in the future of Crowdsource the Truth to prevent some of the people that we're talking about who have quite obviously made overt attempts to interfere with our ability to continue bringing information. And those attempts may include strategic lawsuits against public participation, not public policy, Dave. So your legal advice is not legal advice that I would take or listen to. It seems like a lot of wind and not a lot of sail. But anyway, Quinn, I want to thank you for joining me. I'll see you again next Saturday, and possibly sooner. We'll be in touch throughout the week. This is fascinating research. I hope that people will dig into Bob Crane and the Zodiac Killer and Richard Dawson and all of this crazy stuff. What's next, Quinn, for the time phone hack?
The next for the time phone hack is I'm connecting the old family connections to this network, and I'm connecting it all to the modern people who are potentially running it, because for something like this, you obviously trust your family more than your friends. So, looking at what we're dealing with the cordless phone patent and things staying in the family business, so to speak, that's my next avenue, is researching where all the family members for these people went.
Family business, exactly, Quinn. Quinn, it's always fascinating. And even when you do weird stuff like shave one eyebrow, I know you have a purpose for it. Dude. All right.
That's going to be forever, right? This is going to be forever.
No. Quinn, I want to thank you for joining me. I want to wish you a happy Saturday. Thanks for watching, everybody. See you tomorrow with Sunday with Charles at 3 p.m. Thanks very much, everybody.